I am here with the man, the myth, the icon, John Ramdeen, as we go through all of today's news. It's just you and me. Robin is just hightailed it. He's taken off.
Van City.
And you're going to be doing the exact same thing to me, so I don't hold you in any higher regard. Leaving me all by myself.
I'll be meeting up with Robin, and you'll be watching Prestige while we're in Saskatchewan calling the shows, getting to see Eamon Zahabi.
Yeah, it'll be like I'm hanging out with you guys watching the fights,
Yeah,
just you're not going to respond when I ask you anything.
Robin will respond by Twitter.
Well, there you go. That's coming up Saturday night, everybody, here on Fight Network, Prestige FC 2. But a fight that maybe is going to be happening, maybe not. Michael Bisping and Nick Diaz, they have been linked together ever since Michael Bisping beat Anderson Silva a couple weeks back in London, England. This wouldn't be a possibility until at least August when Nick's suspension is up. But if you're Michael Bisping and you're looking at the things objectively, certainly a middleweight title fight that's always eluded Michael Bisping, but a Nick Diaz fight you could argue would be maybe more of a possibility at this point, given that Michael Bisping doesn't know what the outcome of Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman is going to be. And as we've stated, Luke Rockhold retaining that title, I think that's a hard fight to put together, given that it wasn't all that long ago. We got a really definitive ending to that fight.
Yeah, well, we had Michael Bisping on our preview show leading into that fight with Anderson Silva, and one of the things he said is, as a professional, we all do this for money. And what a bigger fight can you get than a fight between Michael Bisping and Nick Diaz? Both guys are going to talk the hell out of that fight. They're going to create a lot of interest, and both guys will walk out of the cage with a slew of money. And I know that to Michael Bisping, sure, he'd love another crack at Vitor Belfort or get another crack at Dan Henderson. I'm sure he wants another crack at Luke Rockhold, but I think there's so many fights for Michael Bisping because he's always ready to fight. Doesn't matter who it is. If you told him tomorrow he's fighting for the UFC Middleweight Championship of the world, he's going to be as prepared as he possibly can. In his mind, he has belief that he would be able to beat Luke Rockhold the second time.
Now, in regards to Nick Diaz, it's kind of interesting what's happened over the last week involving his brother Nate and the fact that Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta have thrown out the option of Nate Diaz challenging Robbie Lawler. Do you think that this could possibly impact Nick's decision of whether he comes back at 170 or stays at 185 if his brother is going to continue fighting at 170?
I think both of these guys now have an understanding. Not that they didn't have an understanding before, but it's very obvious now that people want to see Nick Diaz and Nathan Diaz. It doesn't matter the weight category.
You're right.
And I think these guys just want to take the biggest fights possible for them, because I'm not saying that they're at the end of their career, but Nate's 30 years old. Nick's older than Nate. So who knows? You could be out of the sport very, very quickly. An injury could happen. So I think both guys will look at things very objectively, try to take the biggest fights, and those biggest fights.
And now they're money fights. I mean, you could look at other times where Nate and Nick, they had been placed in scenarios where they complemented a card, but I think Nick Diaz after the George St. Pierre fight, and now Nate Diaz after Conor McGregor, these are guys that you can put in headline positions. I think either one can headline a pay-per-view, and there's not a whole lot of fighters you can put in that category.
All you have to do when it comes to Nick Diaz is you have him talking all of the promos from his previous fights, whether it's Carlos Condit, George St. Pierre, and then on top of that, you show him knocking out the current welterweight champion, Robbie Lawler, which he has done in the past. That right there sells it. You know, I think a tougher sell would be Nathan Diaz against Rafael dos Anjos because of the nature of what happened in their first fight. But again, you can just spin it. It wasn't the same Nate. We've seen his progression. He's taken things more seriously, and he's on a roll. And I think it doesn't matter what happened in the past, because the last two fights, I think, are getting people excited, and they want Nathan Diaz to challenge for the title.
All right, we look ahead to the future of Anderson Silva as well, because Gegard Mousasi has recently added his name to the hat of people that want to fight Anderson Silva. There's going to be a long list of them. I think that this is an opportune time when we see a fighter that has a gigantic name and resume in Anderson Silva, but you can certainly see a pathway to victory against this guy. He's a key name for many of these middleweights to go after. Anderson Silva could find himself in many different scenarios over the next couple of months. There is the UFC 198 card in May that he's been rumored to be possibly in talks with. Then there's UFC 200. I mean, Anderson Silva, he's got a lot of decisions to make of where he's going to go next. What fights do make sense for him at this point, coming off that Bisping loss?
Yeah, if I was Anderson Silva, I don't know if Gegard Mousasi would be the guy that would be running to get that matchup. Because Anderson Silva's a smart guy. He understands that Gegard Mousasi presents a whole slew of problems. So he'll have to be on his A game. And then what is the upside? Is Gegard Mousasi the fighter that the casual fans know? So if you lose to a Gegard Mousasi, what is the benefit for Michael Bisping? You lose to Michael Bisping. Everybody knows who Michael Bisping is, whether you love him or you hate him. You know he's intense, and you saw what he's made of, especially after taking that flying knee by Anderson Silva. So I think Anderson Silva will look for opponents that are closer in age to him, so maybe a fight with a rematch with Dan Henderson. I just think that Anderson Silva is going to be choosy, and he deserves to be choosy if he wants to be, because he's proven his legacy is already established. So now just take the most important fights, the biggest fights, ones that are going to get the crowd excited, and fights that are going to get him excited.
It's always been a factor for the top-end fighters that you want to be part of fights that are going to generate the most business. But I think we're almost at a different level now, where a lot of these fighters, they don't want to be part of cards that are going to die on pay-per-view or that are not going to perform, and it's a mark against them. I think for a lot of these fighters, they're looking at their opponent saying, I want to fight someone that is going to shoulder their part of the promotion and build this up so that we have the biggest fight possible. And listen, I'm as big a fan of Frankie Edgar as anybody, but that's something that is a major issue for a Conor McGregor, saying, I'm going to do my part, and I want to fight a guy that's going to do his part. Frankie Edgar, Gegard Mousasi, these are tough opponents for a Conor McGregor or an Anderson Silva, and yet they are not at the level of someone like a Nate Diaz that is going to bring X amount of added business to what Conor's bringing to the table, for instance. So I think that's a major factor, and we're seeing that. I go back to that press conference last Friday, and all of the fighters, I mean, they're starting to get that message loud and clear. This is what the public wants. This is what's selling. It's not going to work for everybody to the same level, but that's the playbook.
I agree, and I know there's a lot of fighters out there that compete in the UFC that hate that angle. We've heard after Conor McGregor lost to Nathan Diaz, people talking smack about Conor, saying, it was all hype, and he, talked up a big game. He talked up a big game, and both he and Nathan Diaz are going to make a boatload of money because of that. Everybody knows once the cage door closes, they're going to have a chance to fight. But you want to make sure as many eyeballs, as many people are tuning into your product as humanly possible. And sometimes you got to talk a lot of smack. You got to get people upset. You got to push each other at the press conference to get people mad, so that the mainstream audience, people that don't consume this on a regular basis, you want them to tune in. And that's why Conor McGregor is doing better business than everybody else.
Okay, some quick notes. We mentioned Gabriel Gonzaga. He was in search of a new opponent for Croatia, and step in on short notice is Derek Lewis. How much do you look at this fight in terms of Derek Lewis getting a relatively notable opponent in Gabriel Gonzaga, someone that, years ago challenged for the heavyweight title? I think Gabriel Gonzaga is still somebody that in that heavyweight mix has a role. And for Derek Lewis, this guy, just incredible power that he brings into this fight.
Yeah, but he is, if this fight goes down to the ground, if this is a jiu-jitsu match, and Gabriel Gonzaga, very, very intelligent. He will do his best to force this fight down to the ground and exploit any ground weaknesses of Lewis. But the thing about Gabriel Gonzaga, he is very smart, high fight IQ, and sometimes the fans don't like that. We had a chance to see him in Las Vegas at the end of the year, and people were booing that matchup because, when you get tired, and you fight conservatively. And Gabriel Gonzaga understands it's all about self-preservation first. Sure, we want to entertain the crowd, but it's not going to come at the risk of me hurting myself. So I think he's going to play this game very, very smart and look to utilize his jiu-jitsu.
And also, the Bellator has put together their April 16th card, which is going to be happening in Italy. It's going to be a combination mixed martial arts kickboxing card, as this is kind of the first chapter of Bellator kickboxing. We know on the MMA side, we're going to see Patricky Pitbull Freite take on Derek Campos, who is just coming off his fight with Melvin Guillard. First of all, just the idea of putting both together, is this kind of what you envision as the best option? Would you like to see Bellator kickboxing and Bellator MMA have their own cards? What do you think of the mixture?
Well, I think we have to look back at the Bellator Glory show, and I think most combat sports fans, they were intrigued by it. I don't know how the execution went down, because you have people on one side of the venue that are watching the cage, and then people on the other side are looking at the ring. So everybody's looking up at the screen. It depends. Are they going to have kickboxing inside of the cage, or are there going to be two different platforms? Again, the cage and the ring. I think it's a it's a process that I think Scott Coker is going to have to work out all the wrinkles, but I'm pretty sure he knows what he's doing. I think the fans are going to be entertained.
And not to mention Alessio Sakara in Italy.
That's right. That makes sense.
On that particular card. All right, that is going to be Bellator's next card coming up next month in Italy. And we are going to be back next Thursday night, March the 17th, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's St. Patrick's Day. So grab some beers and you can watch us preview Mark Hunt, Frank Mir going down in Brisbane, Australia.